In the fading light of a Judean afternoon, a rabbi from Galilee stands before the absolute crushing might of the Roman Empire. For the Roman political elite, this trial has a single pragmatic purpose: execute a potential insurgent, crush a peasant uprising, and maintain imperial order through the ultimate penalty of the cross. While the authorities viewed this as the end of a localized rebellion, they were presiding over a trial that would become the most scrutinized legal event in human history. 2,000 years later, a vocal movement of hyper-skeptics attempts to accomplish what the Roman cross could not. They promote a concept known as the Christ myth theory. Proponents of this theory argue that Jesus of Nazareth never existed as a historical person. In this view, he is a theological concept, or an invented legend, rather than a man of flesh and blood. This skepticism has even taken root in academic circles. Groups like the Jesus Seminar dedicate their work to separating the historical figure entirely from the divine Christ of faith, stripping away the miracles and the resurrection. The Christ myth theory faces a significant challenge when measured against modern archaeological and textual data. To understand the reality of the first century, we must examine three pillars of evidence: physical archaeology in the Levant, the hostile texts of Roman historians, and the science of collective memory. Modern skepticism meets a reality built on cross-referenced evidence, providing a historical foundation for the life and impact of Jesus. We begin with the geography of the Gospels. A central mythicist argument has long been that first-century Nazareth never existed, pointing out that the town is entirely absent from the Old Testament and other ancient Jewish texts. Because early historical texts omit the village, critics seized on this silence to claim that the hometown of Jesus was a complete fabrication by early Christians. That argument was directly addressed in 2009. Archaeologists near the Basilica of the Annunciation uncovered a first-century dwelling beneath Nazareth. The structural findings reveal a courtyard house and camouflage grotto. Inside the excavation, researchers documented fragments of chalk stone vessels. These vessels are a definitive cultural marker. Because stone cannot become ritually impure under first-century Jewish law, these fragments confirm a devout Jewish presence living where the Gospels place Jesus' youth. Further excavations nearby also uncovered first-century tombs containing fragments of ossuaries, stone bone boxes unique to Jewish burial practices of that specific era. Furthermore, excavations at an ancient spring known as Mary's Well uncovered Hellenistic and early Roman coins. These currency artifacts match the precise timeline of Jesus' life. This cumulative physical evidence anchors the Gospel accounts in the specific geography and economy of the first century. Moving from the soil to the textual record, we find that no ancient historian, even those deeply opposed to Christianity, ever doubted that Jesus lived. Take the elite Roman historian Tacitus. Writing in the early 2nd century, he held a documented disdain for the early Christian movement, calling it a destructive superstition. Yet in Book 15 of his history, the Annals, Tacitus explicitly records the execution of the movement's founder, whom he identifies as Christus. He goes further, naming Pontius Pilate as the procurator who ordered the execution during the reign of Emperor Tiberius. The most prominent historian of Rome provides independent verification of the timeline and figures detailed in the Gospels. We also have the record of the first-century Jewish historian Flavius Josephus in his text Antiquities of the Jews. Josephus corroborates that Jesus was a wise man who drew massive crowds of Jews and Gentiles and was ultimately condemned to the cross by Pilate. These secular, hostile records provide independent verification that Jesus was a known public figure, executed exactly as the New Testament describes. To grasp the strength of this textual evidence, we apply an objective historical benchmark, comparing the record of Jesus to other universally accepted historical figures. Consider Alexander the Great. He is a primary standard for a historical world changer. His existence is undisputed by modern scholars. However, there is a striking disparity in the data. The earliest surviving biographies of Alexander the Great were written 400 years after his death. Contrast that 4-century gap with the New Testament records. The epistles of Paul and the early creedal traditions begin to appear within 25 years of the crucifixion. These texts were written, copied, and circulating while first-hand eyewitnesses were still walking the earth. The presence of those living eyewitnesses acted as a quality control mechanism. If apostles invented legends, people present in Jerusalem would have refuted the claims. Applying objective historical standards reveals that Jesus of Nazareth is one of the most corroborated figures in all of antiquity. But how did those earliest Christians preserve the truth before it was written down? You often hear the oral tradition of the Gospels compared to a game of telephone, where a message degrades with every retelling. That analogy fails to account for how oral cultures actually functioned. Today, historians use social memory theory to understand how ancient societies transmitted critical data. These societies did not rely on the fragile memory of a single individual. They relied on a robust, highly structured collective memory shared across a community. First-century Jewish culture utilized rigorous rabbinic memorization techniques, employing rhythmic repetition to ensure disciples learned exact words. When these stories were recounted in public oral performance, if a speaker altered the core narrative, community elders were there to correct them. These rigid cultural protocols preserved the core events of Jesus' life, teachings, and death. Living memory acted as a chain of custody, ensuring the divine disclosure survived intact until it was recorded in the written Gospels. When we combine this data, we can apply the minimal facts framework. This approach builds a historical case using only the information universally granted by secular and critical scholars. Even the most skeptical historians grant these facts. Jesus lived, he died by Roman crucifixion, and his followers were sincerely convinced that they experienced his resurrected presence. The evidence for those experiences is grounded in a remarkably early creed found in 1 Corinthians 15, dated by scholars to within months or years of the crucifixion. Crucially, this creed documents appearances to large simultaneous groups. Because hallucinations are individual psychological events, they do not occur to many individuals at once. When you align the historical certainty of the crucifixion with the documented multi-person accounts of the living Christ, the data points toward the reality of the resurrection. This historical foundation provides a tangible context for personal faith. The convergence of archaeological ruins, hostile historical accounts, and early creedal data supports the reality of the resurrection. The same historical reliability that preserves the record of the Roman Empire supports the accounts of the life and victory of Jesus. Type Amen in the comments if you believe, and subscribe to Christ channel for more powerful faith journeys.